And I remember my grandfather standing there saying, "You've made it." Like he had like this welled up pride, and standing on the front porch with my father and my grandfather. That was a confusing thought for me, because here I am, 24 years old. My grandfather, who was obviously later on in life, thought I had made it, and I'm sitting here thinking to myself, I haven't made anything. I've got a long way to go. And I just remembered like the conflict of what he used to think, my father thought, and what I think, and it was just so profound for me at the moment. And it pushed me to go further. It was like, no, I haven't made that. If you're doing what everybody else is doing, you're going to get the same results that everybody else is getting.
Our guest today is known as the Crypto Wealth Coach. He's the author of Prohibited Profits. Welcome to the show, Seth Maniscalco.
Honored to be here. Thank you, Mike. Pleasure.
Thank you, brother. People can visit your website, sethmaniscalco.com. You keep it super easy, and all your links are going to be clickable in the show notes, so people do not have to try to spell your last name, although many people may know it now from obviously the comedian Sebastian Maniscalco. It's all clickable, so guys, don't worry about writing that down in your notebooks or typing it into your tablets. I'm going to say this too. I know you work with high net worth investors, right? I'm going to take a wild guess, though, Seth, that didn't happen overnight, right? So, you didn't wake up one day.
Safe bet. That is safe as rain coming in.
Yeah, or snow in my neck of the woods here in Buffalo. So I know this could be the whole episode here, but can you summarize, some of the things like in your life path that allowed you to get to that? Like, what were some of those key elements on your ladder that now you're working with high net worth individuals?
Oh boy, there's a complex question.
Where do you want to start? I'm going to kick back.
There's a couple elements to. I mean, now you're talking layers on top of layers, right? I'll try to keep it simple and in appreciation of the audience here. The simple answer. I made a lot of mistakes. Quite frankly, quite honestly, I've made a lot of mistakes. I started out young. I made some mistakes when I was a 16-year-old kid. I got involved in marijuana back then, which, back in the fry your brain egg days and all those commercials that were going on back in the 80s was a much bigger deal than it is today, right? I mean, you can go to the gas station and buy cannabis at the gas station today. So people don't really think much about it. However, that's kind of what got me started. I had a job at McDonald's, like most teenagers do, for $5.25 an hour. And after about 3 months in that job, I got my first raise. And I remember it being, I think it was a nickel. Like I sat down, they pulled me into the office and said, "Seth, you're our best employee. We hired you 3 months ago. You're the hardest worker we have. We really want to reward you. Here's a nickel." And I sat there and looked at it, and it was like, what? I'm the best worker? And I got in, maybe it was a quarter. I forget exactly what, but it was an insult. Like I felt like, wait, I'm the best worker out of the 3 or 4 guys you hired, and I'm getting a nickel or a quarter. It's like, wait a second. So that for me was the moment. Like all of a sudden I started thinking about how I could more effectively make money and feed my income, basically, right? Support myself. And I mean, at that point, I had a bicycle and didn't have a car. However, it takes money to live in today's day and age. And that's just a simple fact. I don't care, who you are or where you live. It costs money to live and feed yourself and clothe
Money
yourself.
is access. You need access to food. You need access to a roof over your head. You need access. Want to take your family on vacation. Money is access to that trip, right? But I do know in checking out some of your content and your story that when you were 16, you talked about marijuana. You had a little bit of a situation with the law, and whether today that would have been different, who knows? But it happened, and it kind of was a reality slapping in the face, wake up moment. And it was an opportunity for you to go one of two ways. You could have continued down the wrong path. Maybe it's a gateway to worse drugs and things you were doing, hanging out with the wrong people. I remember you kind of telling a story I heard of. You had like some close friends that were good influences and some that were kind of not so good. But you decided to kind of let it be the slap in the face wake up moment to get you to doing bigger and better things. Can you pick it up from that point in your story?
Well, the concepts were like, how do I make money, right? At that, even if it was, you call it an illegal business, which it was, um, the business principles are the same. You're taking on a certain amount of risk. You're buying a product. You've got to sell it for a profit. Otherwise, you're losing money. A lot of drug dealers are better entrepreneurs than most entrepreneurs because at the
Entrepreneurs.
end of the day, they understand risk, right? Like you're risking your. I'm not promoting this, mind you. I'm
Right.
coming at it. I learned lessons, yes. However, I understood at a very real level what risk was, right? Okay, I got caught. Now I'm in trouble. Now I need to pay the price. I learned my lesson. However, the concepts of building businesses, investing in either product or marketing or whatever it is, and compounding and growing it, you've got customers who need to be happy, right? If you've got a pissed off customer, they don't come back to you. You've got challenges like that may not be, like running an automotive business. However, at the end of the day, some of those principles are the same. You're investing in things and getting more money and growing a business, right? You have to be profitable to continue to grow. So those concepts, while I made the mistake initially early on, getting caught and having recognition of why I was doing this, because my parents were outstanding parents. I love my parents. They were great supportive parents, but they were working class folks. Both my mother and my father had jobs. My mom didn't get home till 6 o'clock at night. My dad didn't get home till 8 o'clock at night. I was a latchkey kid. I walked home at 3 o'clock and I was home for a couple hours. But my parents were working class people. Like they did not invest in the stock markets. They were very fearful about investing and losing money. And I grew up with that in my house. And I had a very different mindset from my parent. My parents and I clashed on a lot of levels because of that. My parents would, do this, Seth, go to college, get a job. And I'm over here doing these things. So I actually learned a lot about myself and why I was thinking that way. It came through some struggles of, okay, yes, I've made some mistakes, and yes, I learned some lessons. However, on the other side, it gave me the experience and the firsthand knowledge to see what being a business owner and an investor can accomplish and can produce, and how it freed me from having to go to McDonald's and spend 4 hours on my afternoons working for $20 or whatever, $10 after taxes back then. So that's really where it came. Like it came. Yes, I made the mistakes, but it allowed me to have self-awareness of why I think differently than the average person.
Yeah, I think, whenever you have a life experience, good, bad, or ugly, if you take it and you can learn from it, that's the only thing you can do. Like, I mean, there's certainly other options of what you can do, but I'm saying if you're really being mindful of it, how did this happen for me? Hey, I didn't want to get arrested. I didn't want to be hanging with the wrong people, doing the wrong thing, being a drug dealer. Like you didn't, when you were 10, that certainly wasn't your vision for what you'd be doing when you were
Right.
16, but it was the moment. But then you were able to say, hey, you know what? Now I'm a little bit more mature. This happened. I'm learning from it. Now you're older and you're looking back, you're going, yeah, I had some entrepreneurial skills back then, man. I knew how to meet people and make clients happy and make a buck on the side hustling. And, I was working and doing this and that. But so I want to know, when you took those skills when you were, I didn't realize that. So it sounds like you were actually dealing. Is that true?
A small amount, yeah. There wasn't
Sure,
selling bricks
sure.
or anything,
Whatever,
diamond things.
whatever. We don't have to go into that. But
Yeah, like
the
very, very
point is,
much.
I didn't know that. So okay. So when did you take those things that you learned? And I'm not, again, just same as you're not suggesting that somebody does that, but the fact is it happened. So you're taking it, you're learning from it. It happened for you then, so you can be a better person. When did you apply it then to business? Like, what was your not?
There's
Did
an
you have a sales
extremely
job or?
important point that you said there, Mike, and I just want to highlight, this happened for you.
Mhm.
That's extremely powerful. Just that perspective in and of itself. I didn't have that perspective when I was 16. I dealt with, the guilt and the shame of being arrested. Mom and dad weren't happy with me. I was grounded, all that stuff that came with it. And it took me a little bit of time for me to recognize, to your point, that's a profound point that's very important. This happened for me, not to me. So I had to learn the lessons and take the lessons and grow from that, right? So I did other things. I've had multiple businesses. I opened my first investment account when I was 19. There were certain period. I remember having, like a substitute teacher later on in high school. when that happened. I think it was a year or two later. We had a substitute teacher who came in and did the double a penny on the blackboard exercise, 1 penny, 2 pennies, 4, 8. If you
You take
run
it to $1
through a
million,
30-day
right?
exercise, or 31, depending on how many days in the month you're looking at, it's like $5 to $10 million when you start compounding that 30 times from a penny. So it's significant. Like, that triggered in my mind, why the hell would I want to have a job? Why does anybody go and spend an hour for $5 of money?
Right.
There's only one of you. You can only work 24 hours in a day. No matter, you can't multiply yourself. You are limited at that point. You're basically in a financial prison. So that opened my mind to say, okay, well, if I can double my money and continue to compound it, when you let that play out, it goes wild, right? From a penny to $5 million. Obviously, that's an example. It's much more difficult to double your money every time. However, if you can understand that conceptually, you are now in a position to grow your wealth.
So 19 years old, Seth. You were 19 when you did your first investment?
I was when I opened my first IRA account. Yes, when I started first doing my investments, that was my very first
Now,
investment.
you mentioned your parents were in financial services. Is that right?
No, my dad worked for a bank, but he was an
Okay.
employee.
I
And
got you.
my mother
Okay.
was like a second. She was
So
a
they very much they saw Seth as get a job, and this isn't a knock on your parents, but this is
no, not at all.
The American way that the school system and everything had us taught was like get a great job and get your 401k and try to retire when you're 65 and hopefully you're happy.
When I came out of the military, after I spent 6 years in the Marine Corps, after I got out of the military, I got my first, real job with Siemens Medical, which is, they're a Fortune 25 company, multi-billion. They're like GE in Germany, okay. But when I came on board with them, I remember getting the offer and standing on my parents' front porch with my father and my grandfather at the time. And I remember my grandfather standing there being like very proud. He was shocked. He's like, Seth, you got a 401k, you got a pension plan, you've got a car, you've made it. I'm like, 24, 25. I just gotten out of the military. And I remember my grandfather standing there saying, you've made it. He had like this welled up pride and, standing on the front porch with my father and my grandfather. And I just remember thinking in my head, that was a confusing thought for me, because here I am, 24 years old. My grandfather, who was obviously later on in life, thought I had made it. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, I haven't made anything. I've got a long way to go. And I just remembered like the conflict of what he used to think, my father would thought, and what I think. And it was just so profound for me at the moment. And it pushed me to go further. It was like, no, I haven't made that. Like, I want to have millions of dollars by the time I'm 30. I had bigger goals than collecting a paycheck.
Yeah, I want to interject in there too. You're Italian, right? Obviously, the Italian
Sicilian, but
last
yes,
name,
yes.
Sicilian. Okay, and I'm Italian. The eyes and the eyebrows and the schnoz gives it away. But it's very much like I know you're saying that because it's the mentality thing, and and I want to be clear, at least I'm going to speak from my heart here. I love my upbringing, my grandparents and my parents is very similar to what you're talking about there, where that would be making it, right? Because, our families come from either literally from Sicily or Italy, and that just being able to own a car and being able to have a job that gives you some kind of investment vehicle, whether we know it's
There's some
good or
perspective.
not, it's just something it's special to them. And, a lot of I'm so grateful that my family even came over to America to allow me to have a dream and be able to be an entrepreneur today. If it wasn't for them deciding to get away from where they were at to here, that's why I'm doing this. It's to honor their legacy of coming over and taking those hits so you and I can have these kind of lifestyles, right? But at the same time, you have to realize that we know and respect their stories and we understand their mentality. Doesn't mean we need to agree with it. Okay, cool, grandpa. I'm 25. I'm a rock star, right? I know where I really want to go. You don't have to tell grandpa he's wrong and have conflict is what I'm trying to tell the audience here. Just know in your heart that cool, but where I'm really looking to go is it's a different something that this family hasn't experienced yet. And I want people who are listening, a lot of young entrepreneurs, to know that you're going to hear that. You're going to hear you're doing so great, man. This is perfect. And if you want more, you're going to get looked at like, why isn't this good enough? Aren't you happy? Yeah, everybody's happy, but you know that your purpose isn't fulfilled yet. So take us right back into your story. So you knew by 30 you wanted to be multimillionaire. Did you actually make that happen by age 30?
We did. Yeah, absolutely. We,
Yeah.
I took it. One of the benefits was going along with the investor mindset. Um, Well, I was still working a job at that point, coming out of the military, collecting a paycheck, young family, all that sort of stuff. One of the benefits that I did have was that those retirement accounts were self-directed brokerage accounts. So while most people tend to default for, your standard low risk portfolio, your medium risk, your high risk portfolio, you go on your corporate website and you pick low risk, high risk, and then they follow those 20, stocks or whatever, and you get an average blend, right? Well, I did the complete opposite. I went in and I said, no, I'm going to run this portfolio myself, and I'm going to pick the stocks and the investments and do it myself. So while the average, was doing like 8 to 12% in a retirement account based on those medium low risk portfolios, I was docking in triple digit percents, running my own investments. I went out, I picked my own stocks, I followed industry leaders that I thought knew what they were talking about. And long story short, there were several times that I was in the right place at the right time. I bought LinkedIn stock 48 hours before Microsoft bought the company. So that was a 200% spike overnight, literally just, everything tripled overnight.
Did you, and maybe you don't want to say this on air, but did you just get lucky, or did you happen to know that something was happening there?
I knew something was happening. One of my founding principles is looking for catalysts in the market. So when big partnerships like that happen, it tends to foreshadow price bumps. So, one of the things we talk about in the new book, Prohibited Profits, is the 11 fundamentals for successful investments. And that is one that has repeatedly come up again and again in my winning investments, is being in the right place at the right time because of certain catalysts. So that's one of the founding principles in the new book, Prohibited Profits. But that was huge for me, like seeing those and recognizing those opportunities, and then simply taking capital and putting it in the markets. Sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong, but when you're right and you're in the right place at the right time before anybody else is, the opportunity to make 1,000% or more is very, very real. You don't have to risk your whole portfolio, right? So, when you get into investing concepts, there's different ways to mitigate risk. You don't need to bet the farm on any one thing. You can take a small portion, 1%, 5% of your portfolio, and put in a bigger risk category and make a much bigger profit on the opposite side. It's a bit of a counterintuitive investment strategy. However, if you do it right and you have, proper weighting, you can actually come out much further, ahead on the other side versus a low risk 20% a year type stock portfolio.
I'm not super well versed in investing in risk, and it's something that I've been having a lot more conversations on the podcast about, which is interesting. And the more you know, the more you can take action on and do it the right way. But the way I can kind of summarize it, and stop me if I'm incorrectly understanding you, is that there's certain times when it makes sense to be more risky and maybe put a little bit more money on blackjack. I'm not talking about the actual game, but like, hey, I'm going to go 5,000 in instead of the minimum. And you start to bet the maximum at times in businesses and things that you're investing in, or your portfolio. And then there's times when it makes sense to do less. And if you see, hey, this company looks like they're in a position to be getting bought out, usually this is where we can see 200 to 1,000% return. Let's make a move. You learn all that through being in the game. It's like any other game. You start to, like a quarterback who sees a defense for 15 years, 20 years, like Tom Brady, he's seen every defensive coverage. He's seen every blitz package. He's faced every defensive coordinator that's been an NFL coach over 20 years. And he has a high success rate because he's seen it before. So he knows, and I'm just using football as a simple example for us to understand what that is looking like, so then he can react to it. And that's very much what you're doing, right?
Well, I think, in simple terms, what you're talking about is probabilities, right? I mean, what's the probability this defender is going to come at me, or that one, right? So now you're responding to your environment, basically.
Yeah.
It's an outstanding analogy. I like it.
Yeah. And sometimes you don't know what they're going to do, but you still put the best play out. Like, we're going to run our
Nobody
best
knows
play.
what the future is. Nobody knows
Yeah.
what's going to happen.
Yeah.
If there's a sure bet, it's the simple fact that humans don't know what's going to happen. In the last 2 years, we've had crisis, we've had financial fallouts, we've had war, we've had nations levy the highest fines on any nation in the history. A lot of things has happened in the last 2 years, right? And I don't think there's a single human on the planet that probably knew this was going to happen with any amount of certainty. The one thing humans are bad at is predicting the future.
Yeah.
So
if everybody knew what was going to hit on the roulette table, right?
The odds
right?
are all the same, right? I mean, I don't know what you've got 60
but
numbers.
I'm just saying, like, if everybody bets,
the odds are all the same. One's going to hit, right?
If everybody hits, though, like, my point is, if everybody plays the same numbers and it hits, then everybody wins $1.
Right.
It's not good if everybody wins, because, it's like a lawsuit that has 10,000 people involved. Like, everybody's going to get a quarter.
Yeah, it's not even worth it.
But if you're like one of 3 people winning, you're going to get, a big payout. So, yeah, it makes sense. The system doesn't want a lot of winners. They want, you want to be one of a few winners when your numbers come up, the lottery numbers. I'm just kind of using that again as an analogy. We're super late to the break. We're going to take a quick 2-minute timeout, give our sponsors some love. We will be right back with Seth. We're going to talk a little bit more about his story, a little bit more about investing. So do not go anywhere. Podcasting is a great way to engage with your audience and stay consistently relevant. The only problem is you don't have the time or desire to produce your own show. You simply want it done for you, and that's where Social Chameleon comes in. All you need to do is press record and upload the files. We'll handle the rest. From planning, production, post-production, distribution, and digital marketing, we have you covered. We realize that times are tough and funds are tight, and Social Chameleon believes in building supportive business relationships. By clicking on the link in this promo, we'll provide you 7 free podcasting tips to get started, as well as a free 30-minute online consultation. This is the perfect opportunity for entrepreneurs, keynote speakers, industry experts, influencers, and anybody who has a personal brand. With Social Chameleon, we help you build a brand that is out of this world. We're ready and waiting, so what are you waiting for? Click on the link to get started today. Hey guys, it's Mike. I'd like to give a proper shout out to Navigator Bookkeeping. Look, for a long time, I ran my business without really understanding the full financial picture. I used my gut and my bank account balance to make decisions, which led to some poor choices and constant stress over my business's finances. I knew something needed to change. At the beginning of 2021, I made a decision that helped pave a more clear path for my business. I started working with Navigator Bookkeeping. Since then, my bookkeeping has been handled for me. I now understand the full financial story of my business, making important financial decisions much easier now, and it helps me plan for where my business is going. I highly recommend giving Navigator Bookkeeping an opportunity to help your business. Check them out at navigatingyourbooks.com. Again, that's navigatingyourbooks.com. It's time to know the full financial story of your business. All right, we're back in action with Seth Maniscalco. You guys can connect with him again on social media. All the links to his website and his social are clickable in the show notes. We can get right back on track here. There's a cool quote that I saw on your website that I wanted to bring into conversation, and it's that most fail at investing because they follow their emotions, right? It's a direct quote from your site. Can you walk us through some of the best practices, maybe pick a few, that help keep our emotions out of the equation?
Probably the simple best mindset to have is your time horizon for what your investment is. If you need to pay the mortgage with the money you're investing in the next 30 days, you are in a bad place because you need that money. Your time horizon for an investment should be 10 years. Now that probably sounds ridiculous. I can't afford to forget about money for 10 years. If you will emotionally detach yourself from that investment if you're looking at a longer time horizon. You shouldn't invest in technology with a minimum of a 5-year time horizon in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things can happen in 5 years. If you detach yourself from the emotions, what happens is when the stock market goes up and down, and we see these green dollars go up, and when you're losing money, you see the red dollars, right? Green and red candles for investors who look at those charts. Green and red is a common color thought. But when you see those things go up and down, it brings your emotions into it, right? Because that's money you've earned, you've worked for, right? Like you had to have that cash in order to put it in the market. So you've already earned it. It's all great when things are going up, everybody's elated, you feel super rich. I'm going to go buy yachts and Lambos. And then the opposite happens when in like the current markets are down, right? I mean, the stock market is tanking, Bitcoin is down. We've dropped something like 40% in the last several months. Those affect your emotions. Now all of a sudden you're worried about inflation and gas prices, and oh my gosh, maybe I put $50,000 into the stock market 6 months ago. Now it's only worth $35,000. Maybe I'd be better off to just protect this and not lose my 35 grand.
Yeah, you're overreactive now.
You're overreactive. The problem is you have now eliminated any possibility to make more money if you do that.
Mm-hmm.
The only way to have, the only way to, going back to your lottery now, the only way to win the lottery is to buy a ticket, right? Like you can't win the lottery if you haven't spent $1 to get in it. You're not gambling, but you need to have a position in the markets in order to compound that position.
Duration is important, obviously, because if you pull out too soon, like you try to take your money out of an investment too soon, because you're overreactive to 6 months of downfall of 40%, that's a huge gut punch if you don't have that kind of. But if you also stayed in it, let's say 2 years from now, it's up 120%. So you were cool. You had to eat it when you were down 40, but if it's going to go up 120, you wouldn't have gotten there if you overreactively took your money out of the deal. But at the same time, you're saying that's why you need it to be a 5-year play, because if you need the money before 5 years, you're not going to be able to have that resistance. You're going to need to react because your family needs a shelter and food, and you need the money. Like you said, if it's your mortgage, you shouldn't be playing with that money. So that makes a lot of sense. Like I really appreciate you like articulating that.
And I just like to, if you allow me to add on to that, and there's probably one other important perspective that I didn't mention, is that primarily I'm a technology investor. So while you could probably have a shorter time horizon if you're investing in, like Johnson and Johnson or something, if you're buying stocks. If you're buying technology stocks, it's a different outlook, because now you're looking at smaller startup companies that are trying to solve problems and be disruptors in that market. So it takes time for them to win. If you look at the dot-com booms that happened in the 90s, right? A lot of these patterns tend to repeat themselves. The cannabis investors, alcohol prohibition has happened, cannabis prohibition. We've looked at crypto prohibition. We're in the now times of psilocybin prohibition. But if you look at technology, and things like psilocybin is like a medical technology, right? This is something new and coming. Mm-hmm. That is our primary investment focus. So I want to make sure I didn't mention that initially, but we're investing in technology. So whether it's software, Microsoft, Tesla, Bitcoin, or any of the other software technology companies that are coming out, what you're really investing in is somebody who's trying to solve a problem. So it's a different kind of investment, if you will. And that's why we come at it from, are you going to solve a problem? Do you have a community that supports you? Are you disrupting a market? Are you the first in the market? It said, going into some of those fundamentals for technology investors, there's a reason we come at it from that perspective. So you need to have a 5-10 year time horizon for any startup company. They're not going to solve problems in the next 30 days.
It's the threshold. It's a necessary threshold for you to be able to see the fruits of it. It's like planting a tree. Don't plan on getting fruit off of that tree for 5 years. I forget the name of it, but do you know that there's actually a tree? It's like a Japanese something, eucalyptus or something weird. I don't know what it is, but I heard Les Brown talk about it, where you literally you plant the seeds and you water it for 5 years and it does nothing. Funny enough, it was exactly 5 years was his example. And then this thing, after 5 years, begins to sprout. and it grows to be like it's 100 foot. It's
Are
incredible.
you
They're
talking about
beautiful.
bamboo? I used to live in
It
Japan. I
might
lived
be
in Japan for
bamboo.
a year.
It's a particular name. It's some kind of bamboo, yeah. But it was like it takes 5 years to
Bamboo's
grow.
amazing.
So if people came next to you and they saw you for 5 years, they laugh at you. Seth, you're an idiot. You're just standing here like a putz, like water in the ground. Okay,
I
Seth, you know
love
what you're
that
doing.
I love that because it's so clear cut. You've got a short-term thinker and a long-term
Uh-huh.
thinker. Short-term
Yeah.
thinkers almost always lose. Almost always. Day traders
Yeah.
almost always lose because they pay higher taxes and they can't control the markets. That's how
Exactly.
technology investors win. We have a long-term thought process. I love that analogy.
Yeah. And technology changes too. So you need to have a good understanding of what you're doing before you can put a lot of money into it for sure, right? But there's got to be times. So you talk about the risk. Can you talk about a time when maybe you heard about like the Ubers of the world, like something that is a disruptor, and you're like, I got to put my chip on the table on this one and get ahead of it.
There were two that really helped me escape the whole, working for Siemens 80-hour work week nonsense. And I was running a $35 million service company for Siemens. I had those proverbial golden handcuffs on. I was making well over six figures and I had a good job. Okay. I mean, a company car, 401, all that stuff that went with it. By all accounts, most people would say I had a really good job. But there were a couple of points where I saw the opportunity that was Tesla back in 2014, and I bought Tesla when it was $20 a share as a technology investor. That worked out immensely for me. And then again in 2015, when I saw what was going, when I finally understood, it took me several months to really understand blockchain and Bitcoin and the profound impact that it was going to have on our lives. But once I did finally understand, I finally got it. All the other wins that I had done with that self-directed brokerage 401k account, I closed out my 401k. I paid a 35% penalty on my 401k, and I put it all in Bitcoin at about $225.
You moved it over to a more forward-thinking investment.
Super risky. Any financial advisor who heard me make that statement is probably having a heart attack right now. However, being in the right place at the right time is what has paid. To answer your question, going back a couple minutes ago, those were a couple of the events that really changed my life and helped, really drive home these concepts for me and why we've come out with the book and companies to help others do the same.
Well, you're known, as I said at the top of the show, the crypto wealth coach. So you just brought up crypto. I'd like to circle back, kind of bookend it with us having a few more minutes together. My crypto wealth coach. So talk about some of the things, and if you can kind of keep it to, I'm not saying we got some people in this audience that are knowledgeable in crypto and some still get kind of, I don't understand what that means, right? So there's going to be everybody in between. I've had a couple people on talk about crypto before, so if anybody's returning to this episode, kind of like picking up that conversation, that's exciting for me to know that people are like moving their knowledge forward. But let's talk about it. So you mentioned that it's a little bit down right now, few months in where it's showing downward. But where do you talk about like crypto over the next 5 years, its current state, and then any area you want to talk about where you see it growing? Like, what do we need to know about crypto in the next 5 years? I mean, that's super general question, so take it wherever you want.
Here's my thought process on crypto. There's something like, and this is not an exact, there are over 20,000 different cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin is the big boy on the block. Everybody's heard of it. It's the king. It's $1 trillion asset, or about 800 billion right now. I think it's sub-trillion. Anyway, Bitcoin's the big one. It's not going anywhere, but there's over 20,000 other projects. The problem with Bitcoin is it was a 10 years ago technology investment. Bitcoin going from whatever it is today, 40,000 to 400,000 is a 10x, and it may happen in the next 10 years. but it's not going to happen quickly. It's not going to happen the next several years because Bitcoin is already valued at 38,000, 40,000, whatever that price is that you're seeing this video recording today. It's gone up from 6 pennies to 5 digits, right? We've already seen the return on the investment of Bitcoin. So what we focus on from our technology investment in the Crypto Wealth Coach is the altcoin market. We're looking for the next coins that are going to be the next big thing. Something, Bitcoin solves a problem, right? It's here. It solves a problem. It works. If you want to buy a house with Bitcoin, you can. If you want to buy a Lamborghini with Bitcoin, Lamborghini will be happy to take your payment and ship you a car. That you can do that. That's a real thing. I have a Bitcoin debit card. I don't have it in my pocket right now, but I pay for my whole life with Bitcoin. Okay, it works. So any company that's trying to be the next Bitcoin 2.0, I have zero interest in. They are not solving a problem. They are not going to disrupt the market. You can make a better and faster Bitcoin, but Bitcoin already works. We don't need another Bitcoin. We need another currency that's going to solve a problem. Like Ethereum has smart contracts. There's DX Tools, which basically eliminates my job as an investment manager. It's eliminating the middleman and solving a problem for other folks on the other side who are investors. There's a multitude of projects. We have over 20 positions in our portfolio that we manage for investors, and each one of them brings a new solution to the market. Okay, now that's where diversification comes into play and why we're holding 20 positions and not 3, because not all of them are going to win. But the ones that do win, we believe, are going to perform at 1,000% or better in the next 3 years or less. That is our investment thesis. We do not get into any particular coin if we do not believe it has the potential to return 1,000% or better in 36 months or less.
So Seth, are you saying there, I just want to make sure I understand. So you're saying you essentially got 20 balls in the air. Some are going to hit, maybe 3 to 5 of them. You'd be blessed if those hit, 1,000% returns, and you're going to lose some, right? So you'll have 17 or 15 of those 20 not do well. But the 3 to 5 grand slams you hit are going to make up for some of the strikeouts.
That's correct? A great way to look at it because you're looking at it from being a bad investor standpoint, right? I mean, if you pick 17 coins that go to 0 and 3 that make 1,000, your odds are pretty low. From a batting average, that's miserable, right?
Yeah.
However, at the end of the day, you're winning in that scenario, right? Because even if you lost 85% of the simple numbers portfolio, the other 15% that performed at over 1,000%, you're up somewhere like 2,500 plus percent. Okay. So yes, you're a losing investor from that standpoint, but your winners are outperforming the losers. That's a great scenario. However, I can tell you our investment percentage with Crypto Wealth Coach is at about a 700 batting average. We are doing much better than that. Okay.
That's monstrous,
but it's a great
man.
analogy because it helps speculators understand what we're talking about. Yes, you can suck at something. You can pick some real bad eggs, but the few that you do pick will pay, leaps and bounds. And
well, I was doing the baseball thing, so I guess it would be like someone who has like a 100 batting average, which is atrocious. But if they, out of 1 out of 10 times they hit a grand slam, now they're earning 4 runs at every 10 bats, and now all of a sudden you're like, well, everybody else is like earning 4 runs at every 10 at bats. So he's actually numerically Moneyball style. He's okay.
Moneyball.
Like we're willing, but is it realistic that you want a guy on the team the only time he hits the ball is a grand slam? I don't think any manager would want that because it's not realistic. Like he's not going to do that the whole year. That the only time this guy makes contact, he's bringing in 4 base runners. That's just not realistic. That's a fantasy. So if you're winning a couple times because some dude on your roster hits 3 grand slams and he's terrible out the rest of the time, you better know that, okay, this feels good, but this thing ain't going to last for long. That's got to probably be similar to hitting on a couple that, man, we got lucky we hit on those, but we cannot bank on that for 12 months.
Moneyball is a great thing because if you watch that movie with Brad Pitt, right, they come in and they analyze every single player. These guys are underpaid. if you've seen the movie, they run through the
I
whole
love it. That's why I
situation.
talked about it. Yeah, that's why I brought it up.
However, short-term thinking versus long-term thinking, and then they ended up, getting all the way to the championship game, right? I think they lost at the end, but they went from a bottom losing team to getting in a championship game by changing how they think. Why did they start winning? Because they started looking at the numbers differently. What's important? What's actually paying? And what gets us to champion? What wins games? What gets
It talks about your
why?
quote though, like they got rid of the emotions because the older guys in that clubhouse, they had emotions.
They
You
were
can't get
tied
rid
to
of
what
this
they were
guy.
doing for the last 50 years, right? You got 80-year-old men sitting in that room, and this is how we've always done it. That's the worst pot. Anybody who says that statement, get out of that room and run away. This is how we've always done it. Oh.
Yeah. Right. So they were working on emotions because they were connected to the game and they love the game, the way they learned how to do it. But Billy Bean came in and was like, it's not emotions. This guy, 400% of the time gets to first base. He's a terrible player. He doesn't know he can't get a ground ball. 400% of the time he's on first base. Nobody else on the team is doing that. I don't care. We'll teach him how to ground a ball. And then they put him at first base, whoever the guy
Let's
was,
take a
right?
third baser and put him on first base or the outfield or
and
whoever it
these
was.
guys are blowing up. Their heads are levitating off their body because they're like, this guy's nuts, but it worked. So yeah, you got to know the numbers, which is really smart. So
You got to
crypto
think a little
obviously
different. If you're doing what everybody else is doing, you're going to get the same results that everybody else is getting. You want something different, you got to head off in a different direction.
This has been an incredible conversation. And when I pressed record today, I didn't know where it was going to go because you and I haven't met before. So this is great. Is there anything we didn't talk about, Seth, that you're just like, man, I want to get this out to the mic'd up universe?
You've got to take risk. You have to take risk. If you're second guessing yourself, if you see a small opportunity, I've learned some of the fear and trepidation, those feelings that I have inside me before I decide to hit the button and put capital on a trade is usually a good indication that I should be doing it. I've tended to do the opposite of what my emotions and my thoughts tell me to do. If I'm scared about something, I've learned it's better off to go out and learn from it, because even if I lose, I will be better off for the experience and the knowledge that I gain out of that situation. That is what I have learned in life. I got to keep pushing myself, whether I never really lose, because even if I do lose a trade, I get smarter. I gain knowledge, I gain experience, and I gain wisdom at the end of it. So you've got to be in the game, and you've got to not be afraid. Separate yourself from the emotions of money, which we all have as humans. I have it. Every single one of us has it. Learn to separate yourself from that and take small risks that have the potential for big gains. If you lose 4 out of those 5 risks, it's not a big deal. If you have some consistency, and it's important to have some conceptual thought. Okay. Don't just go out and start, putting $100 on every small little meme coin that you can find. That's not a strategy. That's gambling. Have a little bit of a strategy. Isolate exactly what fits in your investment thesis and stick with it. Don't do this one day and that the next day. The other very important piece to being a successful winning investor is consistency, right? If you want to have a good career, you need to be consistent and show up every day and not call in sick, right? It's the same thing with investing. People think you can make a huge amount of money, and you can, but you also need to show up and be in the markets and pay attention and be involved. You can't just set money and forget about it. You need to actively manage your portfolio, and it does take time. It is a job.
Seth, what comes to mind for me is the word consistency, but discipline. You got to be disciplined to not overreact, like I said earlier. You got to be disciplined to be consistent. You got to show up and continue to do the things. And I like that you said you got to be active in it too, because a lot of times I think people want to just set it and forget it and hope that that's going to be the winning ticket. And it's like, no, you got to be active and know what you're doing, because without being in it, you're going to be too late when you see a play that you need to make. If you're behind everybody, you snooze, you lose. But also, like, having the patience. I just had that word come up on my last interview, and we were talking about Gary Vee was educating Eric Cabral, my other guests I interviewed earlier today, and his advice to him was, you got to be patient, because again, and whatever it is in life, you consistently do those things that are going to make you small wins over time, but the patience is what's going to really lead you up to the bigger wins. If you're not patient, you really can never experience a big win.
Absolutely. And going with, you can try and double your money, which is a good concept. Any investor would tell you, if you can double your money, that's a good investment. The beautiful thing with technology investing is that it gives us the opportunity to make 4-digit ROIs. So you can compound those investments a whole lot quicker with bigger ROIs. And from a mathematical standpoint, anybody who understands compounding interest will be like, the high C man busting through the brick wall to come and get it. If you understand that concept, there's no reason to have a job.
Yeah, it's like you learned it in high school, and you'll never forget that day you saw those pennies on the board going from 1 penny, 2 pennies to a couple $1 million, right? And you're like, that's a different way to think about life. We're going to start to do more of that and less of this 1 hour for $5 of my time. Seth, this was incredible. Guys, check him out, SethManiscalco.com. Again, remember, it's clickable in the show notes, and his social media is there as well. Seth, I enjoyed this conversation because I learned a lot about things in the financial space, but also what I love about your story is you can apply to anything. Someone could be trying to be the best insurance salesman, or the best, coder, or whatever it is. It could be a semi-pro tennis player, and they can apply these principles about discipline and the things that we talked about into their life. Patience, right? All the different cool areas that I am reminded of in these beautiful conversations. That's why I love doing the show. I absolutely loved having you on here, and you're a new friend, so I look forward to following your big wins, right? And I'm going to continue to get on first base, second base, third base, and hit some of those grand slams along the way. But I really appreciate your time today.
Mike, oceans of gratitude to both you and your audience for the opportunity today. Thank you, brother. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Tell everybody, be great and be grateful. I'd like to give a huge shout out to everyone for tuning in, especially those who listen all the way to the end to hear this message. Seriously, I appreciate you, and my guests do as well. Giving a quick reminder to subscribe to this show. It's completely free and will allow you to receive notifications when new episodes are released. If you'd like to provide a tip as a gift, you can do so via patreon.com/mikedup. It's spelled MIKED up. Patreon.com/mikedup. You can give as little as $1 per month, or as much as you'd like. Every dollar is greatly appreciated and completely unexpected. Appreciate your reviews and your messages coming in on social as well. Keep them coming. Your feedback is valuable and absolutely means the world to me. You can check out more episodes and content at mikeduppodcast.com. We're powered by Social Chameleon. You can also follow me on Instagram. That's where I'm the most active, and it's at Mike DiCioccio, MikeDiCioccio. Thank you so much for your continued support. You guys know what to do. Be great and be grateful.